Hello and welcome again to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small. I'm co-host with Paul Ogden.
Good morning, Mark. Nice tie.
Thanks,
You
Paul.
didn't tell me we were supposed to wear a tie today.
No, I didn't. I thought that I would trick you into looking like a slob.
You succeeded.
Oh, no, I didn't. You did that on your own. We're coming to you today on February 25th, 2012 from Big Hat Books, 6510 Cornell Avenue. That's one place to buy books, including this book, Crimes in Southern Indiana Stories by Frank Bill. It looks pretty fascinating.
It's unputdownable.
Yeah, somebody said that on the cover. It's unputdownable. There will be a book that comes out March 6th. That's the publication date, by Dan Barden, who is a local writer here in Indianapolis. He's on faculty, I think, at Butler University. The title is The Next Right Thing. There will be a signing party here at Big Hat at 6 o'clock on March 8th. So if you put that on your calendar, you can come by here. Big Hat has a gallery up here, G.C. Lucas gallery with paintings. It's kind of neat. It's local artists, but also national artists. This is a local business here. It's not a big box bookstore, so it's kind of cool. And it's embroiderable, which is kind of cool. And Paul, do you want to talk about the show?
Well, the show is Civil Discourse Now. It's a show where we talk about local, state, national, and international events and issues. This particular week, I think we're going to talk about a national and international issue. But it's where we try to bring in civil discussion to the airwaves, if we can call the internet the airwaves. I don't know if we can actually, but
It's a combination, I think.
combination.
But isn't this a wireless router here? So it is going over the air?
I don't know. I don't know how people...
That is for a later show. So anyway, but we're trying to bring a rational discussion, bring some intellectual depth to our discussion.
And despite that goal, we have as guest this week. I'm sorry, friends of the show. Kurt Lorey is on today, and Jeff Cox. We're on to discuss whether the United States is biased towards Israel in policy, things like that. Kurt, do you have a website?
No.
Okay.
I just troll around others.
Ah, okay. He does some excellent blogging as far as trolling around. Trolling is a verb, I guess, and doesn't mean just fishing too. But I guess
Not fishing.
okay. And Jeff is a lawyer here in Indianapolis. He's been a guest on the show several times. Jeff, what's your website?
No boxes allowed. That's the blog. It's complicated. No boxes allowed.blogspot.com.
Okay.
It's for liberal conservatives and conservative liberals.
And Paul, do you have a disclaimer you wish to make?
It probably won't come up today, but I will give my disclaimer. I'm a candidate for judge of the Marion County Superior Court, seeking the Republican nomination. As part of that, part of the rules that apply to judicial candidates, I'm not supposed to take positions on issues that are likely to come before the court or that could come before the court. So I don't think we'll have too many issues about Israel come before the court, but I certainly will not take any position that
certainly you
could come before the court.
I think there'd be ambassadorial immunity for speeding tickets for like an embassy limousine or something.
That could be. That could come
up. Well, we're going to discuss whether the U.S. is biased towards Israel, and we were talking before the show, and we have the last couple of days and conversations here and there. First segment of the show, we're going to talk about a lot of history, because I think a lot of people in history, and let me point out also, the four of us on this panel, none of us is Jewish, and none of us is from an Arab culture. So to the extent that we are not, and someone who's watching this says, hey, wait a second, how can you know, this is not germane to anything that's in your lives. The Germans have nothing to do with it. But also, if you want to email us or blog on the website, civildiscoursenow.com, we can set up a future show and have you on here. But we're here for civil discourse, and so to the extent that disclaimer is being stated, let's talk about like going back in history, because I think a lot of Americans are ignorant of history in general, but especially about the Middle East. There was what was called the diaspora. Kurt, what's your understanding of what the diaspora was?
You're the first one or the second one?
The second one.
The second one, as far as I know, and Jeff can correct me, is that
And you need to speak up a little bit.
the Jewish population in Palestine, which wasn't called Palestine then, but Judea, revolted against what was becoming a Roman political entity, and the Romans made them all go into exile,
The ones that they didn't kill.
the ones that they didn't kill.
Well, there was the first diaspora was perpetrated by the Babylonians. The second one was perpetrated by the Romans in response to a series of Jewish revolts.
That's right, exactly, the second revolt. You're
Yeah,
right.
well,
the second revolt.
The first one, there was a war actually between the Romans, and they were called zealots. And it's very questionable how much the people of Jerusalem or the Jews really supported the revolt. But the zealots took over Jerusalem, and there was parts of Judea, and the Romans had to fight a campaign of about 3 years to take over again. And especially the Battle of Jerusalem, the city was pretty much destroyed. Solomon's temple was destroyed, I should say Herod's temple was destroyed, and the Jews were scattered at that point. Now, a number of them stayed in Judea and stayed around Jerusalem, although Jerusalem was renamed by the Romans at that point. They're trying to make a whole new city out of it. And there was a second revolt by the Jews, and then the Romans said at that point, we've had it.
And that second revolt occurred about 70 or 80 years later.
Yeah, it was under the reign of Hadrian. And the Romans scattered them at that point. And they, in fact, had some legal prohibitions against Jews living in Judea.
And they actually had to obtain special permission to enter Jerusalem on specific holidays, I believe.
Just one holiday.
It was one holiday.
It was the day that they destroyed Jerusalem, I think.
And the Romans, they wanted to wipe Israel, Judea, Samaria off the face of the map. That is why they renamed it Palestine, or Palestina, actually. They named it after the Philistines, who had been the historic enemies of the Jews.
Okay, so going back before that, sorry, I'm kind of negating what I said or contradicting what I said earlier. The Jews, though, kind of moved to Palestine originally. I mean, they weren't originally from there.
No.
And that was, I mean, if you buy what the Old Testament says as being true, God kind of said, well, we need new area developed, move here to the land of milk and honey, and they went there. And so they were newcomers to that, going back, way back.
But they were fleeing, if you believe the Old Testament, they were fleeing slavery in Egypt. So
Yes.
when they settled in Canaan. So that it wasn't that they were just, going there and seeing a peace sign and say, hey, let's take this over. They were actually trying to escape from persecution in Egypt.
Well, and so that was the first diaspora. Then the second diaspora, the first diaspora was after they had settled in Canaan.
Yeah, the Neo-Babylonians took it over, and they were sick of them, and so they scattered them everywhere. And it was the Persians under Cyrus the Great, when they defeated the Neo-Babylonians, that they returned the Israelites to the Holy Land.
If they wanted.
Yeah, yes, it was Cyrus the Great and the Persians, which sort of makes the Iranian government's hatred of Israel today a little bit ironic and a little bit of a historical anomaly.
Iranian irony.
But I'm
Then once you have the diaspora, now here's what I haven't. I've never understood this. I understand the rationalization for it, but I still don't believe it's valid. Is that historically then, beginning about the 2nd century Common Era, Jews were persecuted in the West, in Europe, and blamed for Christ's crucifixion. I mean, they got the blame for Jesus being killed, if one believes that Jesus existed. And I find that a difficult rap because, I mean, first of all, if you read the New Testament, you believe it's true, Jesus was, and he existed, he was Jewish. And the Sanhedrin might have been like kind of pushing, and they were like a panel of priests.
Kind of like lawyers.
Yeah, actually they were. And they were kind of pushing for Jesus to, be taken down and they wanted him killed. But it was a Roman edict under which he was executed. Roman hands placed the spikes and drove them in and pushed the cross up, and so it was Romans that killed Jesus Christ. It wasn't Jews.
Well, we should be in agreement here. Jews did not kill Christ. I think the argument can be made, and this is the Catholic Church's argument, is that the leaders of the Jews killed Christ.
Well, wait. The leaders of the bureaucracy of their church had complicity in the death of Jesus Christ if he existed.
No, I think it's more like the Romans had complicity in it, arguably. It was the Sanhedrin, it was the chief priests, and Annas and Caiaphas, and the scribes who wanted Christ dead, and they campaigned actively to have him killed, and they were threatening a riot if he was not killed.
Okay, but wait a second. But when it describes his crucifixion, it doesn't have like a description of the Sanhedrin has people going in there and actually carrying out the execution.
That's correct.
Okay. So they were complicit, because if someone conspires with somebody in a criminal case, and the person goes in and shoots somebody, the shooter is killing a person. Other people might be complicit in it, but they weren't actually the trigger people.
Well, but what if you're threatening? What if the case is the shooter is threatened with death if he does not kill?
We're talking about the Roman Empire, and I think that they just conquered, and they were pretty.
No, they weren't conquered. They were a client state still.
Well, they were part of a more client state.
It's a difficult thing about who was in charge of what. That's why the Sanhedrin had to petition the Romans to have justice done in
what they thought was justice.
What they thought was justice.
The Romans just didn't want a revolt on their hands. If you look at
they're not very strong there.
Well, they had faced a constant stream of revolts, and the instructions to Pontius Pilate were, just keep things quiet. Don't want to revolt. And in fairness to the Sanhedrin, if you read up on all four of the Gospels, they feared that Jesus was stirring up a revolt, and that if he went too much further, the Romans would just kill the entire Jewish people to get rid of it. Now, the Romans didn't care. But the Sanhedrin were actually, with Pilate and Jesus facing the Jewish people, it was the Jewish people who were under the leadership of the Sanhedrin who were threatening to riot and say, give us Barabbas and crucify him. And the Bible says Pilate was afraid of a riot.
Okay, a couple of things. One is that there's no historical documentation for a Barabbas existing. And we only have two sources contemporaneous to those events that report historically a mention of a Jesus at all. And that's Philo, who's an historian, and Josephus's book, the Jewish Wars.
But there was a Pontius Pilate. That's been confirmed.
That's been confirmed. But I want to say that Pope Benedict has said that he ruled in his book, or I don't know if he ruled in a book, if that's ruling. We're at the end of the first segment, but he said the Jews are okay. They didn't kill Jesus.
Use the word okay.
Well, no, he didn't. But we're going. This end of the first segment. We'll be back.
Another group with a new set of ideas and a new voice to be able to challenge you.
Real briefly, we're at the end of the first segment. As somebody said to me when Nixon refused to debate McGovern, why would you ask for redeal House?
Exactly.
Only this isn't. We'll be right back.